Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Intimacy Lab. I want you to pause for a second and ask yourself a quiet, intimate question. Have you ever sat across from someone you love or thought you loved and felt as if the truth itself was being rearranged? Before your eyes, you catch them in a betrayal, maybe it's an affair, and instead of facing their actions, they seem to turn the entire narrative around. And suddenly somehow you're the one holding the blame. This is not just about infidelity, it's about the emotional acrobatics that happen when trust has been broken, when the person who crossed the line refuses to carry the weight of their choices. It can leave you spinning, confused, exhausted. You start doubting yourself, questioning your instincts, wondering if you somehow caused this, wondering if you were not enough, too cold, too busy, too inattentive. But here's the truth, there are very specific, often subtle psychological tricks some women use after an affair to shift the emotional weight onto their partners, to rewrite the script so they can't avoid shame, guilt, and accountability. And unless you recognize these patterns, you can easily fall into the trap of believing their story over your own lived experience. So today, let's gently unpack this difficult, tender territory together. Let's make sense of how blame shifting happens, why it hurts so much, and what you can do to regain your emotional balance and clarity when the woman you love turns the betrayal around and tries to convince you that you are somehow responsible for her affair. So where do we begin? You see, betrayal is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, whispered into the space between two people who once felt deeply connected. And yet, when trust shatters, it's as if the ground beneath you suddenly disappears. You may have thought that catching her in an affair would mark the end of the confusion. The truth is out now, right? But no, in some ways, this is where the real confusion begins. What often happens next is an emotional dance, one where she, intentionally or not, starts pulling you into a story where you are no longer simply the betrayed partner. You are cast as the very reason she betrayed. Why is this important? Because when a woman begins to turn the blame around after her affair, she's not just protecting herself from shame or guilt. She's also protecting her sense of identity, her need to believe she's still a good person, even while doing something that, on the surface, feels so hurtful. And if you don't understand how this dance works, you may find yourself doubting what you know, feeling guilty, apologizing for her betrayal, and losing touch with your own sense of self. Let's gently unpack how this happens. One of the first subtle tricks she may use is playing the victim of your emotional neglect. You might hear things like, "I wouldn't have gone looking elsewhere if I didn't feel so alone in this relationship," or "You stopped caring, what did you expect me to do?" This doesn't sound like outright blame shifting at first, does it? It sounds like pain, vulnerability, a cry for attention. And of course, we all want to be compassionate partners. We want to understand where someone's loneliness comes from. But here's where it becomes dangerous. She's taking her feelings of loneliness, however valid, and turning them into the justification for a betrayal of trust. The loneliness could have been addressed in conversation, in therapy, even in conflict. But instead, she chose infidelity. By framing her affair as a reaction to your failure to meet her needs, she shifts the focus from her choice to your supposed inadequacy. And this works so well because you may already feel insecure about those very issues. Maybe you have been distant. Maybe you have been stressed, distracted, unavailable in ways you regret. So her narrative slips into that vulnerable place inside you and convinces you that her affair is somehow a reflection of your shortcomings, rather than her inability to deal with dissatisfaction. Honestly, and once this story takes hold, what happens? You begin apologizing, not for your hurt, but for hers. You move from betrayed partner to guilt-ridden fixer, trying to repair what she has done by addressing what she says you failed to give. The betrayal itself, the act that caused the rupture, becomes almost invisible. Then there's another trick that often follows closely behind, the "you drove me away" argument. This one is sneakier because it often draws from very real frustrations or conflicts that existed long before the affair. She might say, "I tried to talk to you so many times, but you didn't listen. I felt invisible. You made me feel unwanted." Again, these statements may contain emotional truths. Maybe you didn't listen as well as you should have. Maybe you did withdraw during a stressful period, but none of this justifies betrayal. In healthy relationships, conflict invites conversation, not secrets. Distance calls for connection, not deception. When she says "you made me feel invisible" as a reason for stepping outside the relationship, she's reframing her betrayal as your failure. This story allows her to protect herself from accountability by placing you in the position of the one who supposedly pushed her into someone else's arms. And here's the subtle manipulation at play. This argument preys on your desire to be a better man. It taps into your sensitivity, your willingness to examine your flaws, your instinct to protect and care. Before you know it, you're asking yourself, did I really neglect her so much that she had no other choice? And the affair itself slips further into the background, overshadowed by self, blame. A third trick she may employ is minimizing the betrayal while exaggerating your mistakes. This is where you might hear, "It was just a meaningless fling, but what you did, ignoring me for months, was much worse." Notice the framing here. The betrayal, the affair, becomes small, almost inconsequential, reduced to an impulsive moment that shouldn't even matter. Meanwhile, your flaws are magnified, portrayed as deep character, defining failures. This distortion of proportion is designed to shift the emotional weight entirely onto your shoulders. It's as if she's saying, "My betrayal was minor, but your inability to meet my needs was catastrophic." And once again, your empathy, your self-reflection, your deep desire to be good and attentive, all these qualities work against you in this moment. When this happens, it's easy to get lost in the fog of confusion. You may begin to feel that her affair wasn't that bad. After all, that perhaps you should overlook it because your own mistakes loom larger. And in this upside-down emotional landscape, she escapes responsibility by painting her betrayal as a symptom of your inadequacy. So what do we see so far? Each of these tricks has something in common. They all prey on your empathy, on your willingness to listen, to take responsibility, to heal, and to love. And they all work by twisting emotional truths, loneliness, conflict, disappointment into justifications for breaking trust. These are not easy things to recognize when you're inside the relationship, especially if you still love her. When someone you care about looks you in the eye and says, "I wouldn't have done this if you hadn't made me feel so unloved," it's hard not to lean in and question yourself. But self-reflection must not become self-erasure. You can acknowledge that no relationship is perfect. You can own your part in any distance that grew between you, but you must also stay grounded in the truth. Betrayal was a choice. Her affair was a decision made at a particular moment in time, and it belongs to her. The reasons behind it, the story she weaves, do not erase the act itself. Now, having opened this door and explored the first ways blame can quietly shift from her actions to your supposed failures, let's keep going. And so here we are, standing inside this delicate, emotional fog where blame has begun to shift. You may not even realize how subtly it's happening because the language she uses often feels reasonable, even tender, wrapped in her pain and her explanations. But beneath that softness lies a very real attempt, conscious or not, to unburden herself by placing that burden onto you. One of the next patterns that emerges is the rewriting of the relationship history itself. You may notice her beginning to reinterpret past events, to reframe shared memories through the lens of dissatisfaction. Suddenly, the good times seem diminished, overshadowed by her retroactive unhappiness. She says things like, "Honestly, I've felt disconnected for years." Even though that's not how she spoke or behaved at the time, you remember warmth, laughter, intimacy, but now she casts a shadow over those memories and invites you to doubt your own experience. This is a subtle but powerful maneuver because when she rewrites the past, she's not just revising the emotional history between you, she's laying the groundwork for a narrative where her betrayal feels inevitable. If the relationship was always broken, then what happened now isn't really her fault. It was bound to happen eventually, right? But think about what this does to you emotionally. You start reviewing everything through this newly colored lens. You begin to question whether you were ever truly close, ever truly loved, or whether all of it was an illusion you failed to see. And that doubt chips away at your self-confidence, your sense of reality, your trust not only in her but in your own memory. This is how powerful these tricks can be. They don't just shift blame, they reshape the entire emotional landscape so that you feel responsible not only for the present but for the past as well. And then there's the classic redirection through emotional escalation. In moments when you try to hold her accountable, when you ask, gently or not, how could you do this? She may escalate the conversation emotionally, perhaps even dramatically, and make herself the most distressed person in the room. Tears, anger, indignation, suddenly it's as if she is the victim of this confrontation. This tactic works because emotional escalation derails your focus. It's difficult to stay centered on your own pain when someone else is crying before you, overwhelmed by their own distress. You might find yourself stepping into the role of comforter, soothing the very person who betrayed you. You shift from seeking understanding to managing her feelings, to calming her storm, to reassuring her that you still care. And this switch happens fast. You enter the conversation seeking truth and clarity, and you leave feeling guilty for having brought it up at all, because look how upset she is. Look how much she's suffering. You might even hear her say things like, "I can't believe you're doing this to me," or "You're making me feel like a monster." And in that moment, your empathy, your compassion, your natural instinct to care for someone you love overrides your need to stay grounded in your own hurt. But underneath this emotional display is often a desire to avoid accountability, to make her distress the centerpiece of the conversation so that her betrayal recedes into the background. Her tears become the focus, not your pain. Another particularly subtle maneuver that emerges in this dynamic is casting herself as misunderstood or not truly known by you. She may say, "You never really knew who I am. You didn't understand what I needed. You never saw me for who I truly was." This statement is painful because it strikes at the very heart of intimacy, the desire to feel seen and known by the person we love. You may begin asking yourself, did I fail to truly understand her? Did I project my own needs onto her? Was I inattentive to her complexity, her desires, her struggles? These are all noble questions to ask in a healthy relationship, but here they are being weaponized to excuse a breach of trust. When she frames her affair as the inevitable result of your inability to see her, she once again shifts the focus away from her decision and toward your perceived limitations. It's as if she's saying, "If only you had understood me, this wouldn't have happened," creating a scenario where your failure to fully grasp her essence justifies her crossing a boundary. This line of reasoning can be incredibly seductive because it invites a deep, almost existential reflection. And for a sensitive, thoughtful man, which you likely are if you're watching this can send you down a rabbit hole of self-questioning. But the truth is, betrayal is not the inevitable consequence of misunderstanding. People can feel unseen and still choose honesty. People can feel disconnected and still choose respect. And so, with all of these maneuvers, the pattern emerges more clearly. The blame is shifted not through aggression, but through nuance, through emotional appeals that seem genuine, through narratives that mix truth with distortion. She may very well have felt lonely, unseen, disconnected, and perhaps those feelings need to be honored and addressed in the relationship. But the choice to betray is still a choice. It is not a byproduct of your flaws or inattentiveness. At this point, it's worth acknowledging something tender. You probably still care about her. And that care, your compassion, your willingness to listen, to understand, to take responsibility for your own mistakes, can be turned against you if you aren't careful. The very qualities that make you a good partner are the qualities that can make you susceptible to blame, shifting. So what do? The first step is recognition. Recognizing these patterns as they unfold allows you to hold space for both truths at once. Yes, the relationship may have been struggling, yes, you may have made mistakes, yes, she may have felt unseen or unheard, and still, the affair was her choice, her actions are hers to own. You are not responsible for her betrayal simply because you didn't love perfectly. No one loves perfectly. You are not responsible for her affair because you failed to meet every need or anticipate every hurt. Healthy relationships survive imperfection. Healthy love makes room for misunderstanding and repair. And so, as we sit here together, as I invite you to reflect deeply, gently, without self-blame, I ask you to remember this. Emotional intimacy is not just about understanding the other person's feelings, it's also about understanding the games we play to avoid facing ourselves. Her blame, shifting tricks are not necessarily signs of malice. Often they're signs of her struggle to face the truth of her own choices. But you must stay anchored in your truth. You must hold your pain as valid, your boundaries as sacred, your reality as real. You can empathize with her feelings without excusing her actions. You can care for her pain without absorbing the blame for what she chose. So we stay here together, gently pulling back these layers, recognizing how the conversation, the very narrative itself, can slip from one of responsibility into one where you, the betrayed partner, are made to feel at fault. And as this happens, something else often emerges, something even more insidious and emotionally entangling. The appeal to forgiveness before accountability has even taken place. You might hear her say, "Can't we just move on? Why can't you forgive me? If you loved me, wouldn't you let this go?" And this is a deeply powerful maneuver because forgiveness is indeed a noble human impulse. You want to heal, you want to repair, you want to restore the connection that was broken. But what she is doing here is flipping the order. Instead of accountability first and forgiveness later, she is asking for forgiveness as a way to bypass accountability altogether. And this premature appeal to forgiveness works especially well because it makes you feel like holding space for your pain is somehow an act of cruelty. You begin to think that your continued hurt is what's keeping you both stuck, that the relationship can't heal because you haven't yet moved on. But here's the deeper truth. Genuine forgiveness requires honesty, it requires acknowledgement, it requires that both people sit in the discomfort of what has happened and see it clearly. Forgiveness without truth isn't forgiveness, it's erasure. So in this moment, when she pleads for forgiveness as a way to silence your pain, you may feel torn. You may feel that to love is to let go. But love that is forced to pretend is not love, it's performance. Closely connected to this tactic is the both sides are argument, one of the most disorienting forms of blame shifting. You may hear her say things like, "We both made mistakes, we both hurt each other, we both contributed to where we are now." And of course, this sounds fair on the surface, doesn't it? After all, no relationship is perfect. You probably have made mistakes. You probably have hurt her in some ways. But let's look more closely at what this framing does. It creates a false equivalency between everyday relational struggles and the decision to betray trust. It suggests that your missteps, your imperfections, your humanity are somehow on par with a deliberate act of deception and infidelity. This kind of argument works because it blurs boundaries. It invites you to think that your ordinary relationship mistakes, forgetting an anniversary, arguing over finances, withdrawing emotionally during stress, are equal in weight to her affair. But they are not. Relationship difficulties are inevitable. Betrayal is not. That we both made mistakes. Narrative can leave you feeling responsible for repairing everything, not just your side of the street. And once again, the focus shifts away from her choices and onto the relationship itself, turning a clear breach of trust into just another shared imperfection. There's something very important to say here. Yes, healthy relationships are built on mutual accountability. Yes, healing requires both partners to examine how distance, conflict, and pain arose. But in the immediate aftermath of betrayal, this kind of moral equivalence can be a way to deflect, a way to avoid sitting with the discomfort of personal accountability. And in this moment, you may feel exhausted, emotionally drained, overwhelmed by the complexity of it all. Because none of this happens in a vacuum, you may still love her, you may still hope to rebuild, you may want to believe that this can somehow make you stronger as a couple. And those hopes are deeply human. They reflect the beautiful resilience of the human heart. But here's where you must practice care, not just care for her, but care for yourself. You need to keep one part of yourself awake to this truth. Your pain is not a failure to forgive. Your need for clarity is not an inability to love. Your insistence on understanding what really happened is not an obstacle to healing. It's the path to it. At this stage in the blame-shifting dance, another maneuver often appears, invoking external validation to justify the betrayal. She may begin to enlist others into her narrative: friends, therapists, even family members who, she claims, understand why I did what I did, or agree that you weren't meeting my needs. This can be particularly disorienting because it adds a chorus of imagined voices to her defense. Suddenly, it feels as if you're not just in conflict with her, but with a whole collective judgment. You start wondering, am I the only one who sees this as betrayal? Did I miss something that everyone else understands? This tactic can undermine your confidence in your own emotional reality. It introduces doubt, isolation, and self-questioning, not just because of what she says, but because she implies that others agree with her assessment. And if she's painting you as neglectful, inattentive, or cold to those around you, you may feel pressured to redeem yourself in the eyes of people who were never inside your relationship to begin with. Here, it's crucial to stay anchored in your own experience. You are the person who knows what happened between you two, the full texture of your shared life, the emotional landscape that existed before, during, and after this betrayal. No one outside can fully grasp what that means. The opinions she invokes, whether real or exaggerated, do not change the essential truth of what occurred. And this is what makes blame shifting so powerful and so painful. It takes advantage of your empathy, your care, your desire to reflect and improve, your love for the relationship itself, and it uses those qualities as a way to deflect responsibility. So where does this leave us? You might be feeling weary, heavy, as if the very foundation of trust is slipping through your fingers, not because you don't care, but because you care so much that you've become tangled in this web of distorted narratives, and that's why this conversation matters so deeply. When you begin to see these patterns clearly, you start reclaiming your clarity. You stop accepting distorted versions of the story as the whole truth. You learn to sit with complexity. Yes, your relationship may have been struggling. Yes, you may have made mistakes, but those truths do not erase or excuse betrayal. And when you hold that distinction gently but firmly, you start to find your way back to yourself. As we continue to gently walk this path together, you may notice something within yourself, an inner dialogue that has become increasingly conflicted. One part of you is desperate to make sense of her affair, to understand the reasons, to find some explanation that can bring comfort or closure. And another part of you feels exhausted, bewildered, as though no matter how hard you try, you can't quite land on solid ground. This is where another deeply manipulative but often subtle maneuver can appear, the moral high ground defense. She may begin to position herself as the one who is enlightened, emotionally mature, even courageous for finally doing what she needed to do for herself. She reframes her betrayal as an act of personal growth, of finally honoring her needs, breaking free from an unfulfilling dynamic that, in her telling, you failed to understand. She may say, "I needed this affair to feel alive again. I finally realized what I deserved. I needed to honor my truth." And on the surface, this language can sound beautiful, even empowering. After all, who doesn't want their partner to feel whole, alive, authentic? Who wouldn't want to support someone's personal growth? But notice the sleight of hand happening here. This isn't truly about self-awareness or transformation. It's a rhetorical move that casts her betrayal as a noble act of self-care rather than a breach of trust. In this framing, you are no longer just the inadequate partner, you become the oppressive figure holding her back from her true self. And this can trigger a deep sense of guilt. You might find yourself thinking, was I stifling her? Was I preventing her from flourishing? Did my love somehow limit her freedom? These are hard questions because they strike at the core of your identity as a partner. You may have tried to create stability, to offer comfort, to provide security. But now she reinterprets that as confinement. This narrative is seductive because it borrows language from growth and healing, words we value, words we respect, but it uses them to justify deception. Personal growth is not the same as betrayal. Authenticity cannot be built on secrecy. If she felt trapped, if she felt unseen, if she felt that something inside her needed to change, all of those feelings were invitations for dialogue, not infidelity. And so here again, you must remain anchored in your reality. You can support someone's journey of self-discovery, but that journey must include respect for the relationship you built together. It cannot come at the cost of your dignity. Another delicate but equally disorienting trick that can appear is emotional withdrawal combined with selective vulnerability. After the affair is revealed, she may retreat emotionally, becoming distant, cold, detached, leaving you feeling even more abandoned. And yet, at strategic moments, she may offer glimpses of vulnerability. "I feel so lost. I don't know who I am anymore. I never meant to hurt you. I hate myself for this." This oscillation between withdrawal and vulnerability is confusing because every glimpse of her pain makes you want to reach for her again, to comfort her, to reconnect. And yet, every withdrawal reinforces your sense of isolation and loneliness. This dance serves a purpose. It keeps you emotionally unbalanced. Just when you begin to set boundaries, she softens and expresses sorrow. Just when you lean back in compassion, she distances again. This push-pull dynamic makes it difficult to know where you stand. Are you helping her heal, or are you simply being kept close enough so she doesn't feel alone? This is the moment when you must ask yourself a difficult but clarifying question. Am I comforting her because I want to heal together, or because I'm afraid of losing her altogether? And that distinction matters because blame shifting thrives on your fear of abandonment, fear of disconnection, fear of losing the relationship. She may not even be fully conscious of this pattern. She may genuinely feel torn, overwhelmed, unsure of what she wants. But that does not mean you must lose yourself in her confusion. The final maneuver we need to gently examine today is the promise of change without substance. You may hear her say, "I'll do whatever it takes, I'll be different, I just need you to stay." And while part of you deeply longs for this reassurance, you may notice that these promises remain vague, lacking concrete steps or sustained effort. This tactic works because hope is powerful. The idea that things can go back to how they were or even become better than before can feel intoxicating. But hope without substance is just another way to delay accountability. It keeps you tethered to a future that may never materialize, postponing your ability to fully process your own pain. Here again, it's essential to remember that promises are easy to make in the immediate aftermath of betrayal, when emotions are raw, when fear of loss is at its peak. What matters is not what she says she will do, but what she actually does over time. Consistent action. Transparency, vulnerability matched with accountability. If you find yourself caught in this dynamic, where beautiful words are not matched by meaningful change, it's okay to step back and ask for time, space, clarity. You are allowed to insist that her promises be lived, not simply spoken. So where does all of this leave you? Perhaps you feel overwhelmed. Perhaps you feel as though the ground is still shifting beneath your feet, that every conversation turns into another opportunity for blame to be redirected onto you. But this is why awareness is so important. When you can name these patterns, you can stop internalizing them. You can sit with your pain without letting it be twisted into guilt. You can reflect on your role in the relationship's struggles without accepting that those struggles justify betrayal. You can care about her feelings without abandoning your own. This is what it means to hold boundaries with grace. It is not about anger or punishment. It's about clarity. You are not responsible for her affair. You are not responsible for her choices. And while healing may require examining the relationship as a whole, that work can only happen when both people face their actions honestly. And so we pause here in this tender space between heartbreak and self-reclamation, where your empathy no longer needs to serve as a shield for someone else's avoidance, and where your care for relationship does not require you to carry the blame for a betrayal that was not yours to own. So now, after walking through these blame-shifting maneuvers, after recognizing how easily your empathy can be co-opted, how deftly she may wrap her betrayal in stories of your failures, how subtly she can take refuge in half-truths, you might feel something beginning to stir inside you, a quiet hunger for clarity. Because there comes a point in this journey where the question is no longer simply about her affair or even her reasons. It becomes a question about you, about your relationship with yourself, about your ability to trust what you feel and know, about your capacity to stand in the storm of someone else's confusion without losing sight of your own truth. This is where the deeper work begins. And yet, even here, there's one more subtle psychological maneuver that she may deploy, one that can test your very sense of self, the invitation to collude in forgetting. After the initial chaos fades, after emotions settle a little, she may start suggesting, directly or indirectly, that the best path forward is to put this all behind us. You might hear, "Let's not dwell on the past. We've talked about this enough. We need to move on." At first, this sounds like a step toward healing. Who doesn't want to stop hurting? Who wouldn't prefer peace over endless conversations about betrayal? But this invitation to forget isn't about resolution, it's about erasure. The difference is subtle but profound. True healing requires integrating what happened, understanding it, making meaning from it. Forgetting, on the other hand, bypasses all of that difficult work. It asks you to suppress your pain in service of restoring harmony too quickly. And it can leave you feeling alone with your unresolved feelings, invisible inside a relationship that looks healed from the outside but remains fractured within. If you accept this invitation, if you join her in pretending that nothing happened, or that it no longer matters, you may begin to notice a quiet corrosion of your own self-trust. Because your body remembers, your mind remembers. Even if words are no longer spoken, the betrayal lingers in unspoken glances, in awkward silences, in the moments when doubt creeps into your heart. That's why this moment matters so much. The choice is not between dwelling on the pain forever and forgetting it entirely. The real choice is between false peace and authentic repair. And authentic repair requires both people to sit in discomfort, to keep the conversation alive until it has truly been metabolized to resist the temptation to paper over wounds that have not yet healed. At this point, it's important to recognize your vulnerability. You may be exhausted. The emotional labor of confronting betrayal, of navigating blame, shifting, of holding space for your own pain while being asked to absorb hers, all of this can drain you. And exhaustion can make false peace feel seductive. It can make you want to surrender just to have a little quiet. But peace bought at the cost of your dignity is not peace. It is silence. So as you navigate this moment, I invite you to hold this question gently. What do I need in order to feel whole again? Not what does she need, not what does the relationship need, but what do you need? What would repair look like for you? What would rebuilding trust require? Because this is your right, to define what healing looks like on your terms. To ask for the time, the space, the clarity you need, to insist that your pain be acknowledged fully, not minimized or brushed aside. And perhaps most importantly, to reclaim your ability to trust yourself again. You see, when blame, shifting has gone on for a long time, it doesn't just damage your trust in her, it damages your trust in your own instincts. You begin to doubt your ability to tell right from wrong, truth from distortion. You guess your memories, your feelings, your decisions. But this self-doubt is not permanent. It is a wound that can heal, but it heals through careful, conscious attention. Through practice, through surrounding yourself with people who validate your experience, who remind you that your pain is real, that your reality matters. This might mean seeking support outside the relationship, from friends, from mentors, from therapists. It might mean writing your thoughts down, reflecting on your emotions, reconnecting with the parts of yourself that may have become hidden during the turmoil. It might mean reminding yourself, every day if necessary, that you are not the sum of her narratives about you. And here's something beautiful that happens when you begin this process. Your clarity returns. Slowly, gently, you begin to see the story of what happened in its proper proportions. You stop exaggerating your flaws and minimizing her betrayal. You stop carrying burdens that are not yours to bear. You stop defining your worth through the lens of her blame, and from that clarity something else emerges, choice. You become free to choose not from guilt or fear, not from exhaustion or confusion, but from a place of self-respect. You may choose to rebuild the relationship if she is willing to do the hard work of genuine repair. Or you may choose to walk away, knowing that you honored yourself by insisting on accountability first. Either way, the key is this: you are no longer stuck in the blame, shifting dance. You are no longer trapped in the endless cycle of self, questioning, and apology. You are free not because she set you free, but because you reclaimed your own freedom by remembering who you are. And this is the heart of it all. Betrayal is a rupture, but it can also be an invitation to return to yourself, to rediscover your boundaries, your values, your capacity for love and honesty. You may not have chosen this path. You may never have wanted to walk this road. But here you are, and in this very moment you can begin to transform your pain into wisdom, your confusion into clarity, your self-doubt into grounded presence. And so we arrive here at this delicate threshold, that space where pain and clarity begin to sit side by side, where you are no longer asking, "Why did she betray me?" as much as you're asking, "How do I take care of myself now?" Because this is the most vital shift of all. The affair, the blame, shifting, the distorted narratives, all of these have had their place in this journey. But they do not define your future unless you allow them to. The truth is, when blame, shifting has taken hold in the aftermath of betrayal, it can leave you emotionally depleted, doubting everything, spinning in circles that go nowhere. And even as you seek answers, the deeper question reveals itself. How do I rebuild my trust in my own emotional reality? This is the heart of healing. It's not about getting her to admit fault one final time. It's about turning inward, reconnecting to your own center, regrounding in your values. It's about becoming intimate again, but this time with yourself. And that starts with allowing yourself to fully feel everything that's emerged from this experience, the hurt, the anger, the grief, the disappointment, even the hope and love that may still linger. You don't have to rush to resolve these feelings. They can coexist. You can love her and feel betrayed by her. You can mourn what was lost and still honor what was beautiful. You can hold sadness and strength at the same time. That complexity is not a flaw. It's a sign of your humanity. So much of blame shifting depends on keeping you disconnected from your emotional truth, keeping you so busy tending to her feelings, her narratives, her pain, that you forget to attend to your own. But when you reclaim your inner authority, when you begin listening again to your own voice, you no longer have to fight for her acknowledgement to validate your pain. Your pain is real because you feel it. Your hurt matters because you matter. This is where dignity lies, in honoring your experience even when someone else tries to diminish it, explain it away, or twist it into something else. You get to say, I know what happened to me, I know how this felt, I know what I need now. And part of what you may need is to gently lower your expectations, not for yourself, but for her ability to fully understand or acknowledge the depth of your hurt. Sometimes, especially if she has been entrenched in these patterns of blame, shifting, she may not be able or willing to meet you where you want her to meet you. And that too is a truth worth honoring, because healing is not dependent on her comprehension. It's dependent on your clarity. You are not obligated to forgive before you are ready. You are not obligated to stay simply because she promises to change. You are not obligated to silence your pain to make her more comfortable. You are free to set the pace of this healing, to ask for space if you need it, to slow down, to breathe, to remember who you are. And in this remembering, something profound happens. You realize that you don't have to carry this story forever. Yes, betrayal leaves scars. Yes, blame, shifting can distort the way we see ourselves for a while, but healing is possible. Not perfect healing, because nothing will make this experience vanish completely, but a kind of healing that integrates what happened without letting it define you. This healing allows you to stand in your truth even if others refuse to recognize it. It allows you to love again even if that love looks different, wiser, more careful. It allows you to trust again, not because you forget the past, but because you've become intimate with it, learned from it, grown stronger through it. And here is where I want to leave you, gently but firmly. You are not alone. If you are watching this and feeling exhausted, confused, perhaps even ashamed for how easily you took on the blame for her betrayal, please know this. Your compassion was not a weakness. Your empathy was not a flaw. Your willingness to listen, to understand, to examine your own part in the relationship, all of these are qualities of a man who cares deeply, who values connection, who wants to grow. But compassion must be matched with boundaries. Empathy must be anchored in self-respect. Understanding must not come at the cost of abandoning your own truth. You deserve to feel safe in your own emotional reality. You deserve to be in relationships where accountability is mutual and honesty is cherished. You deserve to know that your pain matters, not only to you, but to those who say they love you. So wherever you go from here, whether you stay and rebuild with her, or whether you choose to walk away and start anew, may you walk that path not from a place of blame or self-doubt, but from a place of clarity, dignity, and quiet strength. Because betrayal can mark the end of a relationship, but it can also mark the beginning of a deeper, wiser, more intimate relationship with yourself. And that is where your healing begins. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this conversation spoke to you, I invite you gently, sincerely to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. What part of this resonated most with you? Where are you right now in your journey? Your story may help others who are navigating this very same terrain. And if this video has offered you some clarity, some comfort, or some companionship on your path, please consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel, and joining me for future conversations about intimacy, trust, and the beautiful, complicated dance of human connection. Here's to your healing, your dignity, your truth, and your ability to come home to yourself.